Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. We are reading through California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose. We are on the defense's case, part 31, 32, 31. Sorry, 31. And this is, so we're going to hear from the boat people, continue to hear from the boat people as they've been called. So, Leslie Gaskill is the girlfriend of the boat operator. She's still on the stand. She's about to go into cross. And then we're going to hear from Bob Anderson, who is the boat operator. Remember, this is the shark fishing trip that the brothers went on with the parents. I believe it was the night before the homicides, because I believe the homicides happened on a Sunday, and then this fishing trip was on that Saturday night. So I believe that is it happened right up leading up into that week. Remember, the brothers have claimed that that week leading up into the homicides was very stressful, very because Lyle had confronted Jose about the abuse, and therefore tensions were very high in the house. They thought that they were going to lose their lives on that boat trip. And we'll hear more about that, I am sure, from Erik when he takes the stand in the next episodes following this one. So he'll be up in the next episode and he'll be on for a while. So, all right. So let us get back into our transcript here. We are on December 6th, 1995. We're coming back from our lunch break. The court says, okay, everybody's present. Ms. Tari says, Your Honor, I had a couple more questions that I thought of over lunch. I think the people don't mind if I reopen with the court's permission. He says, Sure. All right, let's have the jury out. So she has some more questions that she ended her direct examination, but now she has just thought of more questions during lunch. So they're going to let her do a little more direct follow up. Okay, so the jury has entered the courtroom. The court says the witness is still on the witness stand, that being Leslie Gaskill, and we have further direct examination. Ms. Tari says, Thank you, Your Honor. And she says, Ms. Gaskill, can you just show the jury with the pointer the part of the boat in which Kitty Menendez was for the majority of the trip? She stayed down below, down in the cabin area, down in here. So she wasn't on the top deck. She was uh, below deck where nobody could engage with her in conversation or anything. Okay. Do you step down to get down into the cabin? Yes, it's about 2 steps down. All right. And you indicated that you remembered that the trip was on a Saturday in 1989, but you didn't recall the precise date. Do you remember if it was in August? You know what? I don't. It's a long time ago. All right. Was it in the summer? Yeah. All right. And just to put in a time frame, did you find out shortly after this trip that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez had lost their lives? Yes. And was that a day later or 2 days later? I believe it would have been the following Monday. So, like I said, the homicides happened the boat trip was on August 19th. That would make that the 19th. The homicides took place August 20th, and then people began to learn of the homicides the next morning, which was the 21st, which was that Monday. So, there you have it. All right. So you went on the trip on Saturday, and the following Monday, you learned that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez had lost their lives. Is that correct? Correct. And you learned from the news or Mr. Anderson or both? How did you find that out? Actually, both. Thank you very much. Nothing further, Your Honor. All right. Cross-examination. Ms. Nahara will be doing the cross for the state. Good afternoon, Ms. Gaskill. I just want to clear up a few things with you. You were asked on direct whether or not, right when Mr. and Mrs. Menendez arrived and the defendants arrived at the dock, you mentioned that there was some tension that you noticed. Is that right? Correct. And would you describe this as the kind of tension that would be present, say, in a situation where there was a family outing and the father tells everyone to be quiet and then everyone is quiet for a while? Objection. Counsel's testifying. Yeah, he is. Overruled. The witness says, yes, I believe that is correct. That type of tension. Get the hell out of here. You don't know what kind of tension. You don't know why there's tension in the family. You just met them. You have no idea who they are and what they're all about. That is absolutely objectionable. That should have never been allowed, in my opinion. Ms. Nahara says, and by the end of the trip, I believe your testimony was that you didn't notice the tension basically disappeared. Is that right? Correct. And eventually, this tension passed. Everything was back to normal during the course of the boat trip. Is that right? Somewhat normal, yes. Somewhat normal. The whole family didn't talk or engage with each other than Lyle and Erik talking to one another. That's not normal. The dad's in the back of the boat fishing, shark fishing. The brothers are up in the front of the boat freezing and getting soaked, trying to stay away from their parents, and the mom's in the lower deck supposedly with a migraine or something. I was going to say hangover. That's probably what it really was. But let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say she had a headache. So, how's that normal? And how does that make you think that just because everybody was separate the whole time, now there's no tension? That doesn't make any sense. So this is all speculative and probably shouldn't be given a lot of weight in court. Now, you also testified earlier that when they arrived, they, being Kitty and Jose Menendez and the defendants, they had a cooler and they were all out on that deck. Is that right? Correct. Now, you said that you described something that Jose Menendez did as he barked at the defendants. Is that right? Correct. And when he barked at the defendants, was it something to the effect of basically he told them, pick up that cooler and put it away? Right. He was barking directions as to where he wanted things moved and when. Okay, but isn't that not strange that you can't just ask nicely of your own children to move something? Like, it's an awkward situation. Isn't barking orders at your kids like that? Isn't that a little off-putting? Maybe not in the 90s, I guess. We didn't think about abuse back then. When he barked at the defendants, was it something to the effect of basically he told them to pick up the cooler and put it away? She says, right, he was barking directions as to where he wanted things moved and when. And when we call this, or you characterize this as barking, when he was saying these things, was he yelling? No. Did he raise his voice at all? Not to my recollection. Was it just very directed orders on things that they needed to do to take this boat trip? It was very directed, very short sentences, very to the point. And that's not weird. And basically, with regards to the defendant's demeanor at that time, was it basically that they did what they were told to do? Yes. And was it basically the type of demeanor where they were conveying that, fine, they'll do it, but they didn't really want to do it? Yes. Trying to minimize the way that the father treated the boys on this trip, I guess, is what the point of that was. Now, you started out on the boat trip and you testified earlier that Mrs. Menendez and Mr. Menendez were in the back of the boat. That is correct? Correct. And calling your attention to Exhibit 348 and the pointer, why don't you take the pointer and show us where exactly the back of the boat, both Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were when the boat started? Here's the stern area, and she points to it. And were there several fishing poles back there as well? I don't recall the exact location of them. They were probably set in there's actually holes along the siding, and they were probably sitting in those. Now, is it fair to say that Mrs. Menendez wasn't back in the stern area for a very long period of time? Yes. She was only there for a short time before she went downstairs to the cabin, the lower part of the ship. Is that right? Correct. And were you aware that she went down there because she was feeling seasick, not a headache. Seasick, sorry. I thought she had a headache. He says, uh, or she, sorry, the witness says, yes, that was my understanding. And when Mrs. Menendez went down there, Mr. Menendez stayed in the back of the boat and fished. Is that right? Yes, it was actually we weren't fishing the whole time, but during the duration there was quite a long period of time to get to the point where we actually did the fishing, and he did stay in the back area of the boat. Now, while Mrs. Menendez, after the boat got started, and we have Mr. Menendez up in the back of the boat before Mrs. Menendez went down to the very bottom of the boat, you said that the defendants came around to the front of the boat. Is that right? Correct. Showing you Exhibit 347, just one moment here. Showing you the photo that's been marked 347, where Detective Zoller is standing. Is this the area in front where the defendants were? Yes. Now, for the defendants to get from the back of the boat to the front of the boat, did they go by that little, I'll call it the cockpit area? Yeah, there's about a 6-inch wide place you can kind of shimmy along the side of the front. And I believe you testified that you were up there at that time. I was up at the top, not in the front of the boat, but up at the top area by where the controls are. So not in the front, but at the top. What's the difference? Okay, why don't you show me on this photo where you were? I was up in this area, and she points, and the Menendez brothers were in the front. To get to the front, did they have to go around? Yeah, your footing would be right along this area right here. So they pass by your area up here, is that right? Right. And is it fair to say that no one directed the defendants to go out to the front of the boat, is that right? Not to my knowledge. And to your knowledge, their father didn't tell them they had to go stand in front of at the front of the boat. Is that right? That's correct. So, maybe they were trying to get away from their father, and that was the furthest part of the boat they could find to get away from their parents. And when they went to the front of the boat and they passed the area where you were at, did either of the defendants say hi to you? No. Did either of the defendants even acknowledge you? No. Did they go to the front of the boat and just talk among themselves? I couldn't see them from my vantage point. I have no idea what they were doing, but right when we took off, they did move to the front of the boat. And they moved to the front of the boat without acknowledging you, or is it fair to say they also didn't acknowledge Mr. Campbell, the deckhand? I don't know the relationship between them and Mr. Campbell. Well, did you see them saying hi to him? No. Did you ever see them saying hi to the boat captain? Introductions were done in the beginning, and that was it, to my knowledge. Is it fair to say that basically the defendants were snubbing everyone else in the boat. Really, they're teenagers, kids, young adults. Do you really think they want to be on a boat with their parents and a bunch of strangers and doing this? No. They were forced to go on there, and there were so many tensions at home. They didn't want to be around their parents, and in fact, they even both testified to trying to prolong the little things that they were doing outside of the house that day in order to not have to be home with their parents. Is it fair to say that the defendants were snubbing everyone else on the boat? Ms. Towery says, objection calls for conclusion on the part of the witness. Sustained. Good. After the defendants went to the front of the boat started out and they got soaked. Is that right? Correct. At that point, did the people up in the front laugh? Yes. And at some point after they got wet, did you see the defendants wearing jackets? Yes. Now, calling your attention to the defendant, Erik Menendez, at some point, he left the front of the boat. Is that right? Correct. And okay, I just want to go back. She testified that they thought that the brothers might not be on the boat, and the parents had no real care or concern about that. And yet now we're finding out they also laughed on top of that. So your adult male sons who are sitting on the front of the boat almost potentially go off the boat due to a splash, a wave, whatever, unsteady waters, and everybody on the boat laughs. Not, oh my God, are you guys okay? Let's get you some towels. Nothing. It's just that was funny. Okay, move on with our day. I don't know. I don't get it. Like it's very odd that this whole boat trip is odd to me. And what she testified earlier that they thought that the brothers were going to go overboard. And now they're all laughing. So that's really nice. Calling your attention to the defendant, Erik Menendez, at some point he left the front of the boat. Is that right? Correct. And he went to the back of the boat. Is that right? Correct. And did he also go down into the little cabin underneath area? Yes. And you said that he had some conversations with some people that you couldn't hear, but you saw him have these conversations. Is that right? Kitty Menendez was down below, and when I came down, they were having a conversation. Okay. So they're not snubbing everyone? Okay. Well, you saw him have several conversations with several people. Is that a fair statement? Yes. So how is he snubbing everyone if he's having conversations with several people? Make up your mind, prosecution. Objection misstates the testimony. Overruled. Your answer was what? Yes, as Towery says. And during the course of these conversations, did the defendant, Erik Menendez, appear to be enjoying himself? Yes. Why? Oh, okay. That's not Miss Towery. That's the clerk wrote the wrong thing. So this is, or the court reporter wrote the wrong thing here. This should be Ms. Nahara who's doing the questioning. Ms. Towery did the objection. So that threw me off for a second. So sorry about that. So Ms. Nahara says, during the course of these conversations, did the defendant, Erik Menendez, appear to be enjoying himself? Yes. Now, starting first with a conversation you observed between the defendant, Erik Menendez, and his mother downstairs, did you go downstairs at some point? Yes. And when you went down there, did you see the defendant and his mom there? Yes. And what were they doing? I believe he was getting jackets or additional clothing, and they were having some conversation when I came in. I don't recall what it was. And at some point, did you leave that area? Yes. And did you leave the defendant down there with his mom? Yes. About how long was he down there? Do you recall? Maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Now, apart from this 10 or 15-minute conversation that the defendant had with his mother downstairs, did you also, or you also saw him talking to his father? Is that right? Correct. And sometime during the course of the boat trip, did he come to the back of the boat and do some fishing with his father? Yes. Did he help his father reel in a shark? I believe so. Do you know if they caught more than one shark that day? I believe they did. How many sharks do you believe they caught that day? Maybe three. I really don't remember. And did Erik Menendez help his father reel in all these sharks? I don't know about all of them, but at some point he was involved with that. Did you also see him involved in a conversation with his father? Yes. And did you also see a conversation between Erik Menendez, Lyle Menendez, and their father? Yes. And at some point, when you saw the conversation between Erik Menendez and his father, where were they? Where were they on the boat? In the stern, in the back. So the back of the boat you were just pointing out to us. Correct. So at some point, it's fair to say the defendant, Erik Menendez, left. Can you see what I'm doing here? Left the front of the boat here, and he came back here, and he went downstairs to talk to his mother for a little while, and then he came out here to the back and helped his father reel in some fish. Is that right? The point where he went downstairs and was talking with his mother was at a different time than when he was standing in the back of the boat. Uh, I don't know what occurred between those two things. So remember, she said they were on the boat for like 6 hours. So yeah, they probably had a few conversations throughout the time, especially if Jose was calling them over to help him reel in the fish or the sharks, or barking orders at them. Um, She said that she doesn't know when the two things occurred. But he did all that? Yes, he did all that at some point. At some point, also, when he was back here, he, being Erik Menendez, was back here with Lyle Menendez and their dad, and they were having some conversations. Is that right? Correct. Were they also fishing at the time? I don't believe so. I believe that was when we were headed out. And at some point, did you see seals on this trip? Yes. And when the seals were spotted, where were the defendants? I believe they were up at the front of the boat, and Jose was in the back with Kitty down below, and they were actually sea lions, and they're on the buoys just outside of the harbor. When the sea lions were spotted, did the defendant, Erik Menendez, come back to the back of the boat again? I believe so, yes. Was he back there when with his father when they were watching the sea lions? Yes. And at some point, did they call for their mom to join them? Yes. And did Lyle Menendez also join them back there? Yes. So all is good. The family is not what the brothers say it is because they look at sea lions together. Is that what I'm supposed to take from this? They looked at sea lions or whatever, right? Sea lions. Um, so therefore the family is lovey-dovey and there are no problems. That's what the state wants you to believe. And the defendant, Lyle Menendez, he left the front of the boat to go to the back of the boat to help his father fish and to look at the seals. Is that right? Yes, I believe so. And is it fair to say that throughout this whole trip, he never said a word to you? Yes, that's true. And he never appeared particularly anxious or nervous throughout the whole trip, did he? Objection calls for speculation, not within the personal knowledge of the witness. Sustained. Did the defendant Lyle Menendez appear unpleasant and unsociable throughout this trip? Same objection. Sustained. At some point, did Lyle Menendez also have a conversation with the captain, Robert Anderson? I believe so. And where did that conversation take place? Probably in the stern of the boat. I can't remember a specific conversation or specific time, but I know at some point he was back there, like we said, with a group of people discussing. So that would be another time that he was in the back of the boat. Is that right? We had mentioned before that he was back there having a conversation with Erik and Lyle and his father, and I believe Bob was involved in that. Aside from that, I really don't recall a second incident. And on the way back, did everybody get seasick? At some point, everybody wasn't feeling too well, but Kitty was down below, really not feeling well, and Jose was literally sick several times. And did the defendants also appear seasick? Either cold, sick, miserable, I'm not sure which. Wow. Just wow with that answer. Why am I not able to highlight? Okay. And they were all were. And at that time, towards the end of the trip, when they were coming back, you said you felt that the tension had pretty much gone. Correct. And they were all pretty much together. And is it fair to say that at some point or another, they all went downstairs at some time on the trip back? Objection compounds misstates the testimony of the witness. Overruled. They were not at one time down below. They were not all at one time down below, to my knowledge. The point they were the point that they were together to look at the sea lions, they were in the stern of the boat. And then in various times, did one or the other of the family go downstairs? I never saw Lyle and I never saw Jose downstairs. Nothing further. Redirect. So we have a couple questions of redirect from Ms. THRU. Ms. Gaskill, you were asked about Mr. Menendez barking directions at the beginning of the trip. Would you describe his behavior as domineering, or have you described his behavior as domineering? Yes. Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. But you can say all that other crap on cross. Okay. Was your impression of Jose Menendez's behavior towards his sons when you saw him interacting with them that he was domineering? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. How is that? Okay. You were asked about the demeanor of Erik and Lyle Menendez in responding to Mr. Menendez's directions. Have you described their demeanor as subdued in the past? The defendants as subdued. Yes. Now, in terms of the trips to the back of the boat by Erik and Lyle Menendez, you said that Erik went down below to get the jacket, correct? Correct. And he was down there for 10 or 15 minutes, is that right? Yes. And you also indicated that Erik Menendez went back to assist in the shark or reeling in a shark. Is that right? Correct. And was that because his father told him to do that? Yes. So he was told to do something, so he did it. So if he was told to come to the back of the boat to look at the sea lions or to come reel in a shark, of course the brothers would do that because they were so fearful of Jose. And they were just, it was ingrained in them to listen to him and do as they're told because otherwise, they know that there's consequences. Mr. Menendez called to Erik Menendez and told him to come back and assist. Is that correct? Objection leading. Overruled. Is that right? Yes. And was that in the same manner in which he had given direction to his sons before the boat left the dock? Not with the same sort of direction. It was more of a come back and join in on this and the fun of the trip instead of more directive of you come back here and reel this. I don't buy it. So he seemed excited about catching the shark. Yes, there was definitely some excitement. But he did instruct Erik Menendez to come to the back of the boat from the front of the boat. Is that correct? Correct. And Erik was at the bow when Jose Menendez told him to come back. I believe so, yes. Did he instruct Lyle Menendez to come back also, or was that just Erik? I believe it was both of them. All right. And after they came to the back to assist in reeling in the shark, do you remember if they returned to the front of the boat? I believe they did eventually, although I couldn't tell you when that happened. In other words, is the looking at the seals incident a different incident from the reeling in? Yes, that was much later, a couple hours later. Again, to the best of your recollection, did Jose Menendez tell his sons to come back to look at the seals? Yes. And they did so, is that right? Correct. And you said that the total time that the boat trip took was 6 or 7 hours. Is that right? Approximately, yes. And how much time would you say that Erik Menendez spent either below or at the back of the boat or any of the other places other than the front of the boat? Maybe about 45 minutes or so. So they're trying to make it seem like Eric's just this social butterfly doing all this stuff on the boat. Out of the 6 hour, 7 hour trip, he's at the front of the boat for 5 or 6 hours of those 6 or 7 hours. So that's really, I mean, come on now. It's ridiculous that what the state is trying to do here. Okay. And the rest of the time he spent at the front of the boat at the bow. Yes. And what about Lyle Menendez? Less time, probably maybe 20, 25 minutes. All right. And he also spent the remainder of the boat trip at the front of the boat. Is that correct? Correct. So Lyle spent even more time at the front of the boat. So there you have it. Ms. Tari says, thank you. I have nothing further. The court says, recross. Nothing further, Your Honor, says Ms. Nahara. The court says, okay, thank you. You may step down. You are excused. Next witness, Mr. Levin for Erik is going to be doing the direct examination of Robert Anderson. He says the defense calls Robert Anderson. Court says, all right, step forward, please. Step behind the court reporter and face the court clerk. And over here, blah, blah, blah. Okay, he gets sworn in, spells his name, and all that stuff. Direct examination begins. Mr. Anderson, you are the boat operator of a company called Motion Picture Marine? I was, yes. Objection leading. Overruled. How's that leading? Because you have to say you were, not you were, I guess. Like, come on, really? And what does Motion Picture Marine do? They're a marine production company. What was your occupation with them back in 1989? I had many jobs with them. Do you have something to do with the operation of fishing charters? Yes, I worked as a boat operator. And what does a boat operator do in relationship to fishing charters? Well, I initiate the people to the boat and I instruct them tell them what, does he know what he's doing? Tell them what we'll be doing. Instruct them how to fish, take them out fishing, and I operate the boat during that time and bring them back. During your attention back to August the 19th, a Saturday of 1989, did you operate a fishing charter on that day? Yes, I did. And did you get directions that you were to meet some people down at a dock? Yes, I was. The boat that you conducted the charter from, is that the photograph that's depicted in exhibit, I believe it's 348? Yes. And the charter, is that operated out of Marina del Rey? Yes, it is. I think this is 86, showing you looks like uh, kind of like a Thomas Guide blow up of an area of Los Angeles. Is Marina Del Rey down in this part of this area that I'm holding my pen? That's correct. Okay, and are you familiar with this particular map at all? Somewhat. If it's out of the Thomas Guide, yes. Okay. What kind of fishing vessel is that? It's a 31-foot Bertram. Now, directing your attention back a couple years ago, July of 1993, were you a witness in the first trial in the people of the people versus Menendez? Yes, I was. Objection, irrelevant, overruled. The answer will stand. And you testified in this case as a witness called by the prosecution? Yes. Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. The answer will stand. The state does not want this coming in for some reason. He was a state's witness in the first trial, and now he's being called by the defense, not the state. So, the state doesn't want the jury to know that apparently. For today, have you been interviewed by the police and various prosecutors concerning what you did and saw on August the 19th, 1989? Yes, I was. And did that include talking to Detective Zoller, who's seated right behind me? Yes, sir. And did you talk to previous prosecutors in this case, Mr. Ferraro and Ms. Ferraro and Mr. Kuriyama? Yes. And were you also interviewed by Mr. Khan and Ms. Nahara in this case? Yes. Did you describe to them what it was you saw and did on August the 19th? Yes, I did. Have you described this fishing charter as rather unusual? Yes, I did. Now, directing your attention back to August the 19th of 89, say Saturday, do you recall the time that it was that you were to begin this particular charter? We were initially supposed to meet the family at 3 p.m. Were you ready to leave at 3 p.m.? Yes, we were. Who else was there with you? I had a deckhand, Richard Campbell, and a friend, Leslie Gaskill. You like how he says, a friend. And she said it was her boyfriend. I think one's a little more serious than the other. Who arranged for the deckhand? I did. What was the purpose of having a deckhand? During shark fishing charters, it's mandatory, basically, to have a deckhand. For safety reasons? For safety reasons. Sharks can be kind of dangerous? Yes. What about Ms. Gaskill? Did she have any duties with respect to accompanying you on this trip? No. She was just there for the ride. That's correct. To watch. And what time was it that the Menendez family showed up? I believe they actually showed up about 4:30. And taking a look at defense table, do you recognize Erik Menendez seated next to Ms. Abramson? Yes. Do you recognize Lyle Menendez seated next to Ms. THRU and Mr. Gessler? Yes, I do. Were they accompanying their parents, Jose and Mary Louise Menendez, on the 19th? Yes, sir. It was just the four of them? That's correct. And the three of you, Ms. Gaskill, Mr. Campbell, and yourself? That's correct. Were you the operator or the driver of the boat? Yes, I was. Do you recall about what time it was that you actually departed the marina? I think it would have been right around 5. Around about 5. That's when we left the dock, approximately 5. To actually get outside the marina, it's probably 5:30. Now, before you left, when Mr. and Mrs. Menendez arrived, did you have a conversation with Mrs. Menendez? Yes. And did you introduce yourself to her? Yes, I did. And did she note that both you and her had the same last name? Yes, she did. Anderson, remember, Anderson is the uh, family name of Mary Menendez before she married. Her brothers have the surname of Anderson before they passed. They were Andersons, and the sisters obviously have been married on, but so we call it the Menendez Anderson family, who are the victims in this case that are still trying to get parole for and or release for their loved ones, Erik and Lyle. Um, did she note that both of you and her had the same last name? Yes, she did. Objection calls for hearsay, says Miss Nahara. Court says overruled. The answer will stand. What did she say with respect to the same last name that you had in common with her? She asked me if it was spelled the same way, whether it was uh, O-N or E-N at the end of the name. And what did you respond? I said my name is spelled with an O-N. Did she tell you how her name was spelled? Yes, she did. In the manner in which she related that to you, did it cause you to feel that she felt that she was somewhat superior to you? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. So I'm guessing she's an EN and she thought that that was better than an ON? I don't know. Mr. Levin says, did she make it clear to you, did she make it clear that you were an ON and she was an EN? Court says, and Mr. Levin is an IN. Mr. Levin says, I'm getting that way. Okay, I don't think that the court needed to interject there, but yes. Okay, so the witness says, yes, she did. So she made it clear that she's an EN and he's an ON. She probably didn't like that very much. Mr. Levin says, did you form any initial impression with respect to her demeanor when she did that? Objection irrelevant. Sustained. Now, did she voice any concern over the size of the vessel? Yes, she did. What did she say with respect to that? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. These are some of the last people that spoke to the victims in this case, and you don't want to hear what they had to say? I guess we don't want the truth, do we? Did Mrs. Menendez ever appear to be disappointed? Objection calls for speculation. Did Mrs. Menendez request to know who the other people were that were going on the shark fishing trip? Yes, she did. And how did she express that to you? Objection calls irrelevant. Court says, you're asking what words did she say? Mr. Levin says, well, let me first set this up. Were the defendants, Lyle and Erik Menendez, anywhere near where you were when Mrs. Menendez expressed the concern about or asked you about who the other people were on the shark fishing trip? I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Yes, Mrs. Menendez expressed some concern that there were other people than yourself, other than yourself, going on the fishing trip. I'm going to object, Your Honor, misstates the testimony. Sustained. Did Mrs. Menendez express some concern that there was other people going on the shark fishing trip that she didn't expect to see? Objection calls for speculation. That's not speculation, it's a yes or no question. Did she show concern? Did she ask about it? I mean, okay. The state does not want this in, and they don't want to portray Mrs. Menendez as being anything but this wonderful, loving mother, when of course we all know that she wasn't, and it seems like she wasn't very nice to Bob Anderson either. So, but they don't want, the state does not want you to know that. Mr. Levin says, did Mrs. Menendez ask you who the other people were that were accompanying you on the fishing trip? Yes, she did. And did she express some surprise to you, or at least what you felt to be surprise, that there were other people that were going along on the trip? Objection calls for speculation and is irrelevant. Sustained. When Mrs. Menendez asked who the other people were that were accompanying you on this trip, were the defendants anywhere near when she made that statement to you? I don't recall. Do you recall when it was that this particular conversation took place in relationship to when you left or when you first arrived there? It was just minutes after they arrived. Now, when they first got to the ship, did you give them a tour of the boat? Yes, I did. Did you notice how they were dressed? I'm talking about both the defendants and Jose and Mrs. Menendez. I don't recall how Mrs. Menendez was dressed, but I do recall how Erik and Lyle and Jose were dressed. How were Erik and Lyle Menendez dressed? I believe they were wearing shorts. How was Mr. Menendez dressed? He was also wearing shorts. Now, when they got on the boat and you gave them a tour, did you have any conversation with Mr. Menendez with respect to what would occur on the fishing trip? Yes, I briefed the family about. I'd object to anything beyond yes as non responsive. Sustained. What was the weather like on that particular day? It was a windy, brisk wind, cool wind day. Even though it was summer, would you say it was a cold day? Yes, it was a cold day. And how were the seas on that particular day? Were they choppy? Were they calm? Very choppy. Were there any problems with the boat? Yes, there was. Mechanically? Yes, there was. And what was the problem with the boat? The steering was gone basically, and from the steering wheel, and I had to use the engines to steer the boat. So you were unable to maneuver the boat by what I'm crudely describing or demonstrating as a steering wheel? That's correct. And did it have a steering wheel? Yes, it did. And the part that connects the steering wheel to, I guess it's a rudder, was broken. The cable was broken. Objection leading. Overruled. What was your answer? The cable was broken, says the witness. So you were able to maneuver the ship by some other mechanical means. That's correct. Sort of like a thrust differential. Is that how you did it? Yes, putting one engine in and out of gear and varying the speed of the engines to steer it. How do you go right and left? You pull one you pull one out of gear, maybe put it in reverse to turn, depends on how tight how tight your turn is, and give a little more gas to one engine than the other. Does the operation of the boat in that manner cause it to be, let's say, more unstable than if it were able to use the traditional way of steering uh, with the wheel and rudder? It's not more unstable, no. Is it jerky? I wouldn't even say it's jerky, it's not quite as responsive. Did you tell the Menendez family that the steering cable was broken? No, I actually didn't find out myself until we left the dock. And as you left the dock, where were you positioned, if you want to use the pointer? Where were you positioned on the boat? Excuse me, I need some water. I was up on the fly bridge on the boat at the steering controls. And where was Jose Menendez? As we left the dock? Yes. At the point that we left the dock, I couldn't exactly tell you. Where were Lyle and Erik Menendez? Like right as we were leaving the dock, I couldn't tell you that either. At some point in time, did you see them move forward? Yes, well, pardon me, that's not necessarily a true answer. I didn't see them move forward, but I did note that they were forward. I don't recall seeing them move forward. All right, do you recognize these pictures that are of your boat with Detective Zoller, the close-ups or blow-ups? Yes, I do. At some point in time, did you see Lyle and Erik Menendez move to the front of the boat? Yes, I did. And could you? Well, no, I didn't actually. I don't recall. I saw them move to the front of the boat at different times during the evening, but the initial movement to the front of the boat, I don't recall when it occurred. But you saw them at the front of the boat. Yes, I did. Where is the front of the boat? Is that where Detective Zoller is standing? Yeah, the bow of the boat, and Lyle and Erik actually had their backs up against the window of the boat. Now, inside that window area, that's the lower cabin? That's correct. And the flybridge is up on the top, kind of even with Detective Zoller's shoulders? Yes, sir. That's the area you were in? Yes, sir. You may resume your seat. So, I take it that from your position, you could see both Lyle and Erik Menendez from the flybridge down onto the bow of the boat. Yes, sir. Did you also have a view of the back of the boat of where Jose Menendez was? Yes, I did. And how does one get to the bow of the boat? Is that through the side area, that skinny rail area? Yes, sir. From the gunnel right here, you climb along and there's handrails across here. That's a handrail right there. So you climb and hold the handrail across the side. That skinny ledge is called a gunnel? Yes, sir. Is there any other way to get up to that front? Over the top of the flybridge, but that was blocked off by me. Now, when you gave the Menendez family a tour of the boat, did you take them up to that area? To the flybridge? No, not to the flybridge, but to the bow of the boat. No, I didn't. And so you never showed them that particular area where they ended up? No. Do you know how it was that they were able to find that area by themselves? No, I don't. Now, when you left the harbor and did something unusual happen with respect to another ship? Yes. What was it that happened? A large personal yacht came running down the harbor very fast, leaving the same direction we were, and it threw a large wake towards our boat. How large a boat was it? Oh, I'd estimate between 70 and 90 footer. And this wave that came over the bow of the boat, was that at a time when Erik and Lyle Menendez were there? Yes, it was. And did it cause them to get wet? Yes, it did. Soaked? Yes. Did you laugh about that? Yes, sir. So this jackass was laughing about them getting wet. He's one of the laughers. Why? Well, I was just, it was just, the way it happened because they were sitting in the front of the boat with the wake coming and it just was how's that funny? Did it have anything to do with how, from your contact with Jose Menendez, of how you viewed him and his family? I'm going to object as leading. Sustained. Did you feel that it was funny because of the particular type of family that you were taking out on the charter? Objection leading. Sustained. So he didn't like uh, this rich family who um, gets to just go and spend their money on shark fishing expeditions and clearly, they dress the part, they act the part like they have money because it's all about the image for Jose. So, and I assume they're not the nicest in their interactions with other people because that has been consistently testified to. So they're probably not nice. The parents were not nice to get along with. And so by association, the brothers are, the parents' kids. So he laughed about it, thinking that was funny. Like this family deserves whatever they get, basically. because they're rich and entitled, is what he thinks, is what I'm speculating here by what Mr. Levin is trying to get out. So that objection was sustained. Was there any other reason you thought it was funny? Oh, I guess probably because of the family's position. It adds a little humor to it. If it would have been a star in the front of the boat and the same thing would have happened to them, you kind of laugh about it. So, a celebrity, anybody rich and entitled, basically, he would laugh. Guy sounds like a real gem. And when you say the family position, what do you mean? Be more specifically. Well, there, I'm going to object as irrelevant. Sustained. How would you describe? Let me back up for a second. Did you know the purpose of this particular fishing trip? Why it was arranged? Yes, I learned the purpose of the fishing trip. And who told you the purpose of the trip? Jose. What did he tell you? Objection. Calls for hearsay. Sustained. Did what Mr. Menendez tell you the purpose of the trip was because you uh let me rephrase that. Or let me restart that. Did what Mr. Menendez tell you the purpose of the trip was cause you to act a certain way during the trip? In other words, knowing the purpose of the trip caused you then to do certain things? Yes. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, I'm not offering it for hearsay, but rather for state of mind. Whose state of mind, says the court. Mr. Anderson's, says Mr. Levin. Objection, irrelevant. The court says it's irrelevant. Sustained. Bull. That's baloney. BS. Capital B, capital S. Mr. Levin says, did you attempt to explain what was involved in a shark fishing trip to Mr. Menendez? Yes, I did. And what knowledge, if any, did you understand that he had with respect to shark fishing trips? Objection calls for speculation. Overruled. To my knowledge, he didn't have any experience shark fishing. And from what you knew, did he want to learn about it? I'm going to object. It's going to call for hearsay and speculation. You can answer that yes or no, says the court. The witness says yes. And did Mr. Menendez seem interested in learning about shark fishing from you? At times. And was this after you were out on the trip for a period of time? I'm sorry, did he seem interested after we were? Let me ask you something more directly. At some point in time, you caught a shark? That's correct. Did you call Mr. Menendez over? Yes. And did you call him over for some specific purpose? Well, yes. I'm going to object to anything after yes as non-responsive. Sustained. Why is the state fighting this testimony so much? Did you begin to explain to Mr. Menendez how or what it was that you were doing with respect to landing that particular shark? Yes. And what did he say back to you? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. Did you feel that Mr. Menendez was somewhat arrogant? Objection calls for speculation and irrelevant. Sustained. So any questions about the parents and their behavior, their demeanor gets objected to and sustained, apparently. Let me back up to where it was, but they can ask questions about the defendants and their demeanor and their behaviors, but they can't ask any questions about the victims in this case, even though it's the last time they were seen or engaging with people out in public that we know of. Mr. Levin says, let me back up to where it was that you went and how it was that you actually got to the location where you were fishing for sharks. Did you first go out to catch bait? That's correct. And what kind of bait is it that you catch? Mackerel. So the first thing that you do is find a location to fish for fresh bait for the sharks. That's correct. Why is it that you want fresh bait and not just throw frozen food over? The fresh mackerel pump out their blood slowly and it attracts the sharks better. So you go to separate locations for the mackerel. Yes. Did you do that in this case? Yes, we did. Did you fish for the mackerel? Yes, we did. Did you find mackerel and catch them? Yes. Who was it who caught the mackerel? The deckhand. So Jose can't even catch his own fish to feed the shark or to try to catch sharks. Was this somewhat unusual in the way in which these shark fishing trips go in your past experience? Objection irrelevant. Overruled, you may answer the question. The witness says yes, it was. Why was it unusual? Usually the charters catch the bait fish, or when you say the charters, you're talking about the people who would be like Jose Menendez, Kitty Menendez, Lyle, and Erik? That's correct. And would you say that they did not appear interested in that particular function? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Now, when was the mackerel fishing in relationship to when the bow got soaked with the wave? Approximately a half hour afterwards. Where did Lyle and Erik Menendez remain or go from the time that they got soaked with the wave? Through the whole charter, or no, at that particular time? They stayed on the bow of the boat. And how would you describe the weather conditions at that particular time? Cold. Were you cold? Yes. And at that time, they're still dressed in shorts? Yes. What kind of shirts? I believe polo shirts, but I don't remember exactly. Were they huddled together? Yes. Did it appear to you they were huddled together to keep warm? Yes. Objection calls for speculation as to why they were huddled together. Overruled, the answer will stand. Would you describe the family outing as somewhat, or this family outing as somewhat gloomy? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Would you describe, or have you described, Mr. Menendez before as being snooty? Going to object as hearsay and irrelevant. Sustained. Ms. Nahara says, it's not a prior. Mr. Levin says, did you see a lot of interaction between Lyle and Erik Menendez and Jose Menendez? No, there was very little interaction. Did that seem somewhat unusual to you? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. After you, let me ask you, when you go for the mackerel, do you have to anchor? No. And who was at that and who was it that's operating the boat at the time? I'm operating the boat. So the boat is just kind of floating. Do you turn the engines off? We're trolling for mackerel. So are you able to leave the fly bridge area and go back to the area of where the Detective Zoller is standing in the lower photograph? Yes, I did do that. What do you call that area where Detective Zoller is standing in the lower blow up? I believe it's 337. That's the deck. That's the deck? Where are the fishing poles in relation to where Detective Zoller is? On the pole holders are on the gunnel of the boat. On both sides? On both sides. There's one in the center, but we weren't using it. How many fishing poles did you set out for this particular charter? I don't recall exactly. Would it be more than one? Yes. And is that because in case the charters, in this case, Mr. Menendez and Mrs. Menendez and Lyle and Erik Menendez, want to man the fishing poles, they can? Yes. Objection leading. Overruled. How long would you say the entire trip lasted? From the time we left dock until the time we came back? Came back. Oh, about 6.5 hours. And during that time, you were close enough in terms of location to see Jose Menendez, Mary Louise Menendez, Lyle, and Erik Menendez pretty much throughout the trip. Is that correct? Except for Kitty Menendez, who was down below and she wasn't visible to me most of the trip. So that's because you were on the fly bridge. That's correct. And that would be below your feet. Yes. You don't know what she was doing when she was in the cabin? No. Other than the cabin area, were you able to see the rest of the boat? Yes. So you're not able to see Kitty Menendez on the deck or on the bow, so you assume that she's down below in the cabin. Yes. Was that pretty much throughout the entire trip? Yes, it was. How long did you fish for mackerel? Probably just about a half an hour. And following catching the mackerel, where did you go? We went to the Dominator. That's a. Sorry, go ahead. It's a sunken vessel off of Redondo, near Redondo Beach Pier, near the first point past the pier. Is that near Palos Verdes Peninsula? Yes. Is this a common shark fishing spot? Yes, it is. And I take it that at that point in time, you began fishing for sharks. Yes. Do you use different lines than you do for the mackerel? Yes. And so are these different poles that are already set up? Yes, we had poles set up for both the shark fishing and the mackerel, and yeah, they're different setups altogether. So at that point in time, you set out the shark fishing poles, and did you explain to Mr. Menendez what it was that you were going to do? Yes. And did he say anything with respect to that? I don't recall. All right. How many sharks did you catch? I believe we caught three, two or three. I'm not sure which. This particular incident that you described lasted for about 6.5 hours. Would you say that the demeanor of the parties pretty much stayed the same throughout the whole trip? No, there were changes. In general, they stayed the same, but there were times when their demeanor changed. And what did it change from and what did it change to? I think when we caught the sharks, everyone became excited and I'd say went from quiet to being more talkative. And when you say quiet, did it appear to you that they weren't having a very good time? Objection leading and suggestive. Sustained. What do you mean when you say that they appeared to be quiet? How would you describe, let's say, Lyle and Erik Menendez's demeanor before the shark was caught? I believe I described it as stoic, not talkative, to themselves, I guess. Thank you. I have nothing further. Cross examination. Ms. Nahara will be doing the cross for the state. All right, well, looks like they're not taking a break for the day or for their afternoon break yet. So we're going to keep going with some cross examination of the witness by Ms. Nahara. Let's see. Mr. Anderson, normally, do you take these shark fishing charters at two particular times of the day? Yes. And is it very, very early in the morning, about 3 or 4 in the morning, or in the evening around 6? Yes, that's correct. Well, then why were they leaving at 3? You know, they were leaving at 3. That's what he testified to. So, okay. He says that's correct. And did the time that you picked to go out with the Menendez family, was that kind of a compromise to everyone's schedule? Yes, it was. And was it better to leave at 4:30, which is closer to 6, than at 3? Oh, yes, yes. So the time that you left was a better time to leave to do the particular kind of function, the shark fishing that you were going to do. A better time for the shark fishing. And when the Menendez family arrived, you met on the dock, is that right? That's correct. And did you introduce yourself to them? Yes, I did. And did one member, sorry, did one member of the family take it upon themselves to introduce everybody? I don't believe so, not to my knowledge. Then is it fair to say everybody kind of came and introduced themselves? Gosh, I really don't remember offhand how that part of the introduction went. At some point, you were introduced, though, to Mrs. Menendez, is that right? Yes. And you had some conversations with her, is that right? That's correct. The two of you chatted for a period of time, is that right? Short period of time, yes. Did she seem like a pleasant woman? I don't know. He doesn't want to say yes. Was she pleasant and polite to you? Objection. Witness doesn't have personal knowledge, also vague. Court says, well, it is vague. You had a short conversation with Mrs. Menendez. Is that right? That's correct. Did you have did you have any conversation with Mr. Menendez? Yes. Chat with him for a little while out on the dock? Not really on the dock. Just actually, as he got on the boat, we talked about. That's when I believe he told me why he wanted to go on the shark fishing charter. Now, before you all went on the boat. Did you send them to go get a fishing license? Yes, I did. That was a weird question. Just the way it was worded. And did you send the whole family off to get fishing licenses? That's right, yes. Forgot about that till now. Did they all go off together to get their appropriate paperwork and fishing licenses? I would have objected to that because you don't know that they all went off together to get their licenses. You don't know. They could have gone separately. Like, what? But he says yes. And after they came back on board the boat, and you gave them the orientation of the boat, is that right? Yes. When you were giving the orientation of the boat, did Mrs. Menendez pay attention? Objection. Calls for speculation. Sustained. When you were giving the orientation of the boat, were you giving it to everybody in the family? Yes, I was. Sorry, I feel like I got something in my eye. Did the defendants appear to be bored with what you were saying? Objection calls for speculation. This is just a funny question. Were they bored with you? Were you being boring? Sustained. After you gave them the orientation of the boat, the little statement about what you'd be doing, everybody got on board the boat, I take it? Actually, they were on the boat while I was doing this, so I could show them where the safety equipment was and the bathroom. Makes sense. And how long before you actually took off were the defendants in the back of the boat before they went to the front of the boat? I don't recall actually at what point they went to the front of the boat. They could have done it before we left dock or right afterwards, but it was I saw them at the bow of the boat a very short time after we left the dock. So when you saw them in the stern of the boat before they left the boat, at that time when you spoke to them before you started up everything, did the defendant Lyle Menendez seem interested in what you were saying, or did he appear to be uninterested? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Well, is it fair to say that he did not appear at that time particularly anxious? Objection vague. Sustained. You said at the start of the trip that you thought that the defendants were quiet. Is that right? I'm sorry, at the start of the trip? Right. You said that their demeanor was quiet. Is that right? Yes, they were quiet. And you said that you felt that they were stoic. Is that right? Yes. By that you mean that they weren't talking to anybody, is that right? That's correct. And in fact, they were basically snubbing everybody. Is that right? Objection, Your Honor. That's vague. Sustained. Calls for conclusion on the part of the witness, says the court. Were they acting like they were only interested in talking to each other? Objection vague also calls for a conclusion. Sustained. You can't have it both ways. You can't have him, Erik, going off and like having all these conversations, but also being trying to be like whatever the words are that they were saying. Not snubbing everybody. Snubbing everybody. Yeah, you can't say that. You can't assume that. That's a speculative at best. The defendants at some point went to the front of the boat. Is that right? That's correct. And they were by themselves in the front of the boat. Is that right? Yes. And they didn't appear at that time to be particularly interested in fishing. Is that right? Objection vague, also ambiguous. Overruled on those grounds. Mr. Levin says calls for a conclusion and speculation. Sustained. Now, sometime after the defendants got soaked in the front of the boat, you saw the defendant, Erik Menendez, leave the front of the boat. Is that right? Yes. And did he go up to that flywheel area or flybridge area? No, he didn't. Did he go up did he go up partially to look up there? Pardon me? At different times during the night, he did. If you're talking about right after he got wet within a short time frame, no, he didn't. What I'm saying is sometime after they got wet to pull it into time after. Shortly after they got wet, no, he did not walk up to the flybridge area, but he did walk to the down below, actually. He went down below where his mom was? Yes. And then sometime during the course of the fishing trip, he went up to the flybridge area. Is that right? There's normally a ladder. Can I put it out? Sure. There's normally a ladder that would be right here. He points to um, where it is on they obviously have a diagram of the boat that they're using. I don't know if I can find one, but you guys can picture front of the boat, back of the boat. There's a fly something, a fly deck, a fly bridge area, whatever that is. And then there's the below deck, the cabin area. Um, Next question is sure. The witness continues on saying, there's normally a ladder that would be right here, he points, and because my deckhand and my guest were up there, and myself most of the trip, when people wanted to talk to us, they'll come up and they'll like step up on the ladder. And so, yes, he did that. If he actually came up to the fly bridge, I don't think so. So there's some kind of step up where the fly bridge is, which is where Bob Anderson was seated, I guess, most of the night, or at least portions of this night. And he says Erik may have like popped his head up, but never came up all the way to that area. So he came up did he appear to look up and see what was going on and what it looked like? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Did he come up and did you observe him coming up the ladder and looking around up there? Objection vague as to looking around. Overruled. The witness says, I'm not sure if he was. Actually, observed him looking around up there, but he did come up to the ladder, or he did come up to the ladder, and we talked on a couple of occasions. With regards to the fishing, at some point, were you present when Mr. Menendez caught a shark? Yes. And was that at the point where the defendant, Erik Menendez, went to the back of the boat to help him reel it in? Objection assumes facts, not in evidence. Overruled. Oh, Erik came back to the rear of the boat to watch, and I think we had to pull up the other lines that were there, so I'm not sure if he actually came to watch him reel it in, or we probably had him pulling up one of the other lines that were in the way. So he was involved in the catching of the fish, or, well, I guess you would say, yeah, I guess you would say he was involved in the catching of it. Anytime you're back there involved in pulling something, you're involved in the catching of the fish. Okay. Did you think possibly strike that? Do you recall that Erik Menendez was actually involved in the reeling up of a shark? Yes. And Jose Menendez was present at the time Erik Menendez was reeling up the shark. Is that right? Yes. And was there a lot of excitement within the family when these sharks were caught? Objection. Calls for speculation. Overruled. Yes, there was. Everyone seemed pretty happy about it. Yes. And at some point, I'd like to change that. I'd like to say excited, not happy. I mean, it's hard for me to tell if people were happy, but they were excited about it. And has someone talked to you about this case before today? Have any of the defense attorneys talked to you about this case before today? Yes. Did anyone suggest to you what might be appropriate ways to describe certain events? No, I think we talked about my own descriptions of the events. And have there been some suggestions of perhaps there's a better way to describe the events that you related to us? No, actually. As you're asking the questions, I'm trying to answer as honestly as I can to the questions that you're asking. And sometime previously, you described this as an exciting event when the shark was pulled in. Is that correct? I'm pretty sure I must have, yes. Do you recall ever telling us that you thought it was a pretty happy event? I don't recall that. Did I say that? I'm just asking you if you know. At some point, there were sea lions that you saw when you were out on the fishing boat charter. Seals, yes. Is it seals or sea lions? I believe they were seals, but I can. And when the seals were spotted, did everyone come to the back of the boat to see them? Yes. By everyone, I'm talking about Erik and Lyle Menendez and their mother and father. Yes. Were you back there too? Yes. Or were you up the flybridge at the flybridge? No, we were actually anchored at the time, and quite possibly, I was up at the flybridge part of the time and down below during other parts of it. Now, at some point, well, the boat that you were on, Motion Picture Marine, they do charter work for some movie companies, don't they? That's correct. And you've done some work, have you not, for different movies? Is that right? Yes. And you were involved with your boat in working on the movie Tequila Sunrise. Is that correct? That's correct. And at some point in this charter, did you mention this or you did mention this to the defendant Erik Menendez? Is that right? Yes. And he appeared to be very interested in this subject. Is that right? Objection. Calls for speculation. Sustained. Did he want to talk to you about this? Objection. Calls for speculation what he wanted. Overruled. The witness says yes. Did he appear to be excited about this topic? Calls for speculation. Overruled. Witness says yes. Would you say very excited? I couldn't say that. I'd say very interested. And with regards to that, at some point during this conversation that you were having with Erik Menendez about the movie Tequila Sunrise, did he call Lyle Menendez over to talk to you about it as well? Yes. Did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, come over and talk to you about this movie that you were involved in? Yes. Where did this conversation take place? This happened when we were shark fishing by the Dominator. And where on the boat when you were all where on the boat when you were all talking about this? Is that a full question? Where were you on the boat when you were all talking about this? Oh, I believe I was standing right to where the ladder would normally be, and Erik and Lyle were probably standing right next to me. They were on the deck where Detective Zoller is, or standing on the gunwale. And where was Jose Menendez when you were having this conversation? Jose actually had gone down below deck and then came back out when we were talking about it. And then when you worked on the movie Tequila Sunrise, you had an opportunity to meet the actor Raul Julia. Is that right? Yes. Objection, Your Honor. That's irrelevant. Motion to strike. It's foundational. The court says, let's get to what it was that occurred, if anything. So he's even doubting that this is relevant. Ms. Zahara says, did you describe him as a large and confident man? Sorry, are we talking about Raul Julia? Yes. Objection, irrelevant. Without an answer, Ms. Nahara says, did you similarly describe Jose Menendez as the same type of person? Objection, irrelevant. The court says, objection sustained. The answer stricken. Objection sustained to the previous question. The answer is stricken. So he must have answered? Oh, he did answer, saying that Raul was a confident man. He didn't get to answer the next question. So he's striking that answer, I'm guessing. All right, Mr. Levin says, and asks that the jury be admonished. The court says the jury is admonished to disregard the previous answer to the previous question. Ms. Nira says, now, when the defendants were in the front of the boat on the times that they were, I believe counsel asked you, you used the term huddling together. Is that right? Do you recall him using the term, first of all? I'm sorry, do I recall him using the term? Right. No. Okay, would you describe the defendants in the front of the boat as standing together in the front of the boat? No, no. They weren't standing together in the front of the boat? At different times of the night they were, but if you're talking about while we were going out, no, they weren't standing together in front of the boat. Were they in the front of the boat when you were going out? Yes, they were. Were they leaning up against the back there? That's correct. They were leaning against the glass. Were they just had their backs to the glass and they were just kind of laying across the let me go up there. Were you basically just kind of laying against the back here? Or were they just laying up against the back here? He says, yes. So their heads came to about, and she points to something. He says, no, it doesn't come up that high. When you sit down there, you're actually down. Your head's down on the top of the glass right there. There's a ledge that comes out right here. It's not very visible. There's a ledge that comes out here, probably 1.5 feet long. So their heads would be around the top of the glass right here. Were they standing or sitting? No, they were sitting. They were sitting out in the front of the boat there? That's correct. Does that afford the person or people who are out here some privacy from everyone else in the boat? Objection with respect to privacy. It's vague and also calls for speculation. Overruled. You can answer the question. Yes, it does. What are you guys trying to insinuate? Insinuate that the brothers were plotting their parents' death or something at that point? Get real. And along with affording the people who are, in this case, the defendants who are sitting out in front of the boat some privacy, is it fair to say you can't hear any of the conversations between the individuals who would be in the front of the boat there? Objection. Calls for speculation. Overruled. The witness says it's very difficult, especially with the engines running. May I just have a moment, Your Honor? Says Ms. Nahara. I have nothing further. Redirect. So little redirect here from Mr. Levin. And he asks, Mr. Anderson, that area in the front of the boat on the bow also provides one with some degree of security. Isn't that true? So if they're afraid of their parents, that might be another reason why they're hiding there. Or not hiding, but why they felt safer in that position. Objection calls for speculation as to what security means. Do you understand what that means? Yes, I do. Okay, you can answer the question. Yes, it does, says the witness. And that's because the only way to get back there would be to walk on the narrow gunnel to get to that area, correct? Is that why it's secure? No. Okay, well then why is it secure? It's secure because that's almost the center of the boat right there, just a couple feet back, and center line of the boat is always the most secure. Okay, but lay people who aren't boat people probably don't know that. But the only way to get back there is to walk on that narrow gunnel. I have no idea if I'm saying that right, but that's what I'm going with. To walk on that narrow gunnel on either side of the boat to get to the bow. That's right. That's not advisable when the boat is underway in choppy seas. No, it's not. Not for non-experienced boating people, no. When Lyle and Erik Menendez went up to the bow of the boat, they did it before the boat took off, correct? I'm not sure if they did it. I'm not sure when exactly they moved up. He said that multiple times now. Before we got out of the harbor, shortly after we were away from the dock, I saw them at the bow of the boat. So, very shortly after they left the dock. Now, could you see from the fly bridge down to, let's say, the tops of their heads from your position? Basically, there's a ledge right there, so you can kind of miss just the top of the head, depending on whether they're leaning forward or not. So when you're up here on the fly bridge, where I'm pointing with my pen and you're looking down, is this with the position of the people in this particular case? Lyle and Erik Menendez are somewhat underneath the ledge that I'm pointing at? Yes. And so, because of the obstruction, you're not able to see their heads clearly, correct? That's correct. So, you couldn't see whether they were talking or what they were doing, could you? Objection leading. Overruled. Like I say, depending on whether they were leaning forward or sometimes you could and sometimes you could and sometimes you couldn't. But you're not prepared to testify, are you, that you saw them, what appear to be engaging in lengthy conversation, but you just know what they said. You just don't know what they said. So let me reread that. You're not prepared to testify, are you, that you saw them, what appear to be engaging in lengthy conversation, but you just don't know what they said? No. Objection. Leading. Overruled. You can answer the question. The witness says no. You don't know what they were doing, correct? And the witness shakes his head from side to side. Do you ever see Lyle Menendez handing anything to Erik Menendez, or do you remember seeing that? I don't recall that. No. Did you ever see Erik Menendez handing anything to Lyle Menendez? I don't recall that. Did you ever see Lyle Menendez holding up a piece of paper and writing on it and pointing to things? No, I never saw that. Did you ever see Erik Menendez holding up a piece of paper and writing on it and pointing to things like they're plotting stuff? No, I never saw that. Now Ms. Nahara asked you a question about whether or not we had discussed this case. I met you this morning, did I not? Not for the first time, no. Okay, but I'd spoken to you before, but I met you in the cafeteria this morning. Yes. And over the lunch hour, I had an opportunity to go to lunch with you? That's correct. Who paid for lunch? I did, myself, for my lunch, my own. You paid for your own lunch. I paid for my own lunch, right? That's correct. Did you do that on purpose? Yes. Why'd you do that? Because I didn't want to be biased in any way or seem like I was being biased in any way. Did I ask you to go over the testimony that you had given that was reduced to these particular pages? So they're looking at trial transcript testimony. Yes. You read your testimony? Yes. Did I also offer to show you what was purported to be police reports, summaries of what you told both Mr. Khan and Ms. Nahara and Detective Zoller and Mr. Kuriyama and Ms. Ferraro on prior occasions? Yes. You've never ever told the prosecutors, did you, that you thought that this was a happy trip, did you? Objection leading. Rephrase the question, says the court. You, Ms. Nahara asked you if you had told them before that you described this as a happy trip. My question is, isn't it true that you never told Mr. Khan, Ms. Nahara, Detective Zoller, Ms. Ferrero, or Mr. Kuriyama, or myself, anyone, that this was a happy trip? Ms. Nahara says, misstates the testimony of whether it was a happy time picking up the sharks versus a happy trip. Court says, all right. Don't argue the objection. The previous objection was that it was leading, and the way you phrased it, it still is leading. Okay. Did you ever describe this before as a happy trip, before even testifying today? Not to my knowledge, no. You have described it as weird, have you not? Yes. Have you also described it as gloomy? Yes. And as the attitude of Mr. Menendez to be stoic? I'm going to object as to the attitude of Mr. Menendez. Mr. Levin says, yes. The court says, overruled. The witness says, I don't recall saying that. Did Mr. Levin, um, sorry, I just lost my spot. Sorry. Mr. Levin asks, you also, well, you testified to that today. Do you remember? Well, it's talking about the boys, the brothers. Did you ever use the word snooty? Well, I've seen it in my testimony where I use the word snooty, or I've seen it in the police report to the word snooty. But I said before, I'm not sure if I actually used the word or if it was that it was in relationship to your description of Mr. Menendez, correct? I'm going to object, misstates his testimony that it was the defendant's. Sustained. With respect to the time that the charter was supposed to go out originally, what time was that on August the 19th, that Saturday? Gosh, I don't remember the original time. I want to say they wanted to start at 11 or noon. What's the best time to go out for shark fishing for sharks? Well, if you left the dock about 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning or 6 p.m. at night, somewhere around there. And it was generally set for 11? I believe so. I'm not really positive about that. It went through a couple of time changes. And the time changes that it went through, was that a result of you changing the time? It was a result of my recommendations of when to go. So he was trying to get them to push the time back further. But were you getting instructions that the time would change because of the unavailability of Mr. Menendez or the family? In other words, were they changing the time or were you changing the time? No, I believe I was trying to change the time, but there ended up being a compromise. I'm not sure why there was. Okay. It was originally set for the morning, though, correct? Yes, sir. Now, Ms. Nahara asked you before about the first moment when the people came up. The Menendezes came up, and she was suggesting that, or at least asking the question, everybody introduced themselves. That's not what happened. Objection leading, sustained. Did everyone introduce themselves? I don't remember how I actually was introduced to the members of the family. Was Did Mrs. Menendez express surprise that there were more people on the boat than yourself? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. Your Honor, may we approach, says Miss Abramson, and the court just flat out says no. Gotta love it. He really just does not respect the defense, I don't think. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, this particular evidence is offered for Erik Menendez's state of mind. The court says, which? This last question? Mr. Levin says, this area that I wish to go into. Court says, the last question you said or something else. This last question. Is there an offer of proof as to whether this is something that's going to be proved by some other evidence? Mr. Levin says, yes. Court says, okay, the objection's overruled. It's not being received for the truth of anything that's being said, only what was said. Not a conclusion, but just what was said. Mr. Anderson, I want to direct your attention back. This will be the last area I go into, but directing your attention to the time when Mr. Menendez and Mrs. Menendez, both Lyle and Erik Menendez, first approached the boat. Did Mrs. Menendez express to you surprise? The court says, again, you're asking him to form some sort of opinion. Did Mrs. Menendez ask you anything at that time? Yes, she did. And what did she ask you? She asked me who else was with me on the boat. And what did you say? I explained it was Richard Campbell, was the deckhand, and Leslie Gaskill, who was just a guest. And did she say something after that with respect to what her expectations were? Well, I don't recall her exact words, but yes, she expected just me aboard the boat. And did she express that to you verbally in a way that that's what you understood she meant? Yes. And when she said that, where was Lyle and Erik Menendez, to the best of your ability, if you recall? I believe at that point we were all in the back deck of the boat. All of you together? Yes, except for Richard Campbell and Leslie Gaskill, who were up on the fly bridge. Did she also express some concern about the size and configuration of the boat? Objection to the word concern and leading. Sustained as to calling for a conclusion on the part of the witness. Did she ask you, or did she say anything to you about the size of the boat? Yes, she did. And what did she say? She said she expected the boat to be larger. When Erik Menendez came up to the flybridge to talk to you, where was Jose Menendez? Well, I believe I talked to Erik a few times during the trip. When you talked to Erik Menendez, was Jose Menendez anywhere nearby? He was either on the back deck of the boat or down below or moving between the two. But not with you when you had the conversation? Objection, leading, sustained. Mr. Levin says, thank you. I have nothing further. The court says, all right. Anything else? Ms. Nahara says, yes, Your Honor. She's got some more questions for this witness. Mr. Anderson, the times that you were just referring to Mr. Levin, when you spoke to Erik Menendez, you said that you spoke to him several times. Is that right? A few times. A few times. And when you spoke to him, he was in the back, in the stern area. Is that right? Yes. Well, he'd either be on top of where the ladder was, which is on top of an engine compartment, or in the back deck of the boat in the area by where Detective Zoller is standing. And when he, being Erik Menendez, came to that area and spoke to you several times, this was not in response to his father. Is that right? In other words, his father didn't call him back there? No. And he just came back there. Whoa, I went too far. My thing's being slow now. Hold on. I lost my spot. Oh, here I am. Sorry. And he just came back there on his own accord and talked to you a few times? Yes. Now, you said that in response to some questioning that you had described the trip as weird. Is that right? That's correct. Now, when you say weird, that really doesn't tell us what you mean. Objection, that's argumentative. Court says the remark is stricken. Ask the question, please. Ms. Nahara says, thank you, Your Honor. What did you mean by weird? It was different than a normal charter in how, I guess, how the family interacted together. Well, that's not the answer she wanted. When you say different from a normal charter, is it fair to say it was different from a normal charter because the defendants didn't really seem all that interested in fishing? That was part of it, yes. And is it fair to say that oftentimes when families plan an outing and bring their sons along to go fishing, that they are usually excited about fishing? Objection, irrelevant, also vague and calls for a conclusion. These are also adults who probably have no interest in doing this. And they have a lot of other things that they're worrying about at this moment in time. Anyways, overruled. Did I say that? So objection, irrelevant, vague, and calls for a conclusion. Overruled says the court, you can answer the question. When it says some people are forced along, and so not everybody is always happy to be there and be fishing. Good. I'm glad that was the answer. Uh, for the most part, though, is it fair to say? In general, most people are happy to be there and want to learn how to fish. And in this case, the defendants weren't interested in fishing. Is that fair? It appeared to me they weren't interested in fishing. And did they appear to be bored with the whole thing? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. You said that, you said that you described it once again in response to Mr. Levin's question that it was gloomy. It was a gloomy trip. It was dark out, is that right? I didn't mean about weather gloomy, weather, but yes, I felt it was gloomy. So like the feeling, the emotional vibe on the boat was gloomy. Did you feel it was the entire trip was gloomy, or do you feel that at some times things people started to enjoy themselves on the trip? No, at different times, like I said, the family appeared excited to me. When you say it started out gloomy, is it fair to say that when it started out, people weren't as enthusiastic as they were when the sharks started getting caught? That's correct. And is it fair to say that from what you saw, the family seemed to get along fine? Objection, vague as to time. Overruled. Can you repeat the question, please? Okay. When you went out on this, when you took the defendants and their mother and father out for this charter, did they appear to get along fine for the most part? Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Did everyone appear friendly? Objection calls for speculation, also vague. Overruled. He can answer the question. The witness says, I assume you're talking about to each other and not me. Ms. Nahara says, I'm talking about, first of all, to each other. The witness says, I'm not sure how they act when they're friendly to each other. I didn't know the family well enough, but objection, Your Honor. No personal knowledge. Court says he's given his answer. Mr. Anderson, have you described this when Mr. Levin asked you about how you had described this in the past as unusual or stoic and gloomy to district attorneys you had spoken to previously? Isn't it true that you also stated previously that the family seemed to get along fine and everyone was real friendly? I believe I was probably saying they were real friendly to me. They seemed to get along fine. There was no arguing, there was no yelling, if to make me think any different than that. And with regards to the defendant, Lyle Menendez, is it fair to say that there was nothing you observed in his demeanor that you've been asked about and the behavior that you observed on this fishing trip that would lead you to believe that he was fearful in any way of his mother? Objection calls for speculation and compound. Sustained. Ms. Nahara says, as to the compound, or, and the court says both. Did you observe anything in the defendant, in your observations of the defendant, Lyle Menendez, that evidenced any kind of fear of his mother? Objection calls for speculation on the part of the witness beyond the scope. Sustained as to calling for the conclusion on the part of the witness. At any time in this trip, did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, appear to be afraid of his mother or his father? Same objection. Sustained. Like, how many more times are you going to try to ask? You said that you weren't sure if the boat was in motion when the defendants walked to the front. Is that right? That's correct. So it could have been in motion when they walked to the front. Is that right? Yes. Ms. Towery says objection calls for speculation on the part of the witness, not within his personal knowledge. Court says overruled. The answer will stand. Ms. Nahira says they walked back and forth on that ledge several times. That's correct. Is it fair to say it's not, I don't want to do a double negative here. It's not uncommon to have people walk back and forth on the front of the boat on that walkway. No, it's not. Objection irrelevant calls for speculation not within his personal knowledge of the witness. Overruled. How far is it from where they were seated in the front of the boat to the back of the boat? I'm sorry? To which part of the rear of the boat? Well, let's say the part where Detective Zoller is shown in the photograph. Oh, it's about approximation, probably 11 or 12 feet. 11 or 12 feet. And Jose Menendez was in the back of the stern most of the trip? That's correct. And he was approximately in the area where Detective Zoller is in that photo. In that, is that right? Yes. And he was about at the time that blah, 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 blah. Let me start that over. At the time that the defendants were in the front of the boat, about 11 or 12 feet away from them, is that right? That's correct. And while the distance was only 11 or 12 feet, because of the way the boat was set up and the engine, if the defendants were talking or doing anything in the front of the boat, Mr. Menendez wouldn't be able to hear that. Is that a fair statement? Objection calls for speculation. Do you have an opinion about that? The witness says, yes, I don't think he'd be able to hear. And would you be able to hear from up there? No. And when Mr. Levin was asking you about the security of the boat, you said that the front of the boat is the safest place. Is that right? No, I didn't. The center of the boat. The center of the boat is the safest place. Does that have something to do with if the boat sinks? Has to do with the rocking. When you're in the center of the boat, you're experiencing less rocking than anywhere else. Is that a good place to be if you're prone to seasickness? The best place is actually in the stern of the boat, looking off to the back at out at the horizon. So when you said security, what you're talking about is the rocking of the boat. Yes, I have nothing further, Your Honor. Anything else? Mr. Levin says very briefly. He's got some redirect here. For most of the trip, would you say that Lyle Menendez remained in front of the boat of the bow? The boat on the bow. Yes, he did. And when I suggest and you adopt it, what do you mean in terms of the hours of that trip? How many hours would Lyle Menendez have been at the front of the boat at the bow? Well, if you're talking about a total of 6.5 to 7 hours, I'd say he was probably at the bow of the boat 6 hours. So similar to what um, Leslie Gaskill said. So him and yet Leslie are pretty much saying similar things. They haven't really contradicted one another, although um, she was kind of more difficult on cross, I think, saying some things that may or may not be taken well, but we'll see. So what about Erik Menendez? Probably a total of a half hour to 45 minutes less. So he says less. Thank you. Nothing further. Anything else? Ms. Nahara says, I have nothing further, Your Honor. The court says, thank you. You may step down. You're excused. We'll take a recess until 25 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll ask that counsel remain. So the jury leaves the courtroom. Following proceedings were held. Court says, court still in session. Who's your next witness? Mr. Levin says, next witness will be Erik Menendez, Your Honor. All right, says the court. Mr. Levin says, do you have some motions? The court says, motions were filed today. I've read them. First, as to the motion filed on behalf of the defendant, Erik Menendez, and the co-defendant, Lyle Menendez, that has to do with cross-examination. Why is any of this material subject to a hearing at this stage? Mr. Levin says, well, Your Honor, for purposes of conducting the direct examination, I'm putting the court and the prosecution on notice that I am not going to be eliciting any of the evidence that we so object to them going into on cross, and I'm asking for the motion in limine and a ruling from this court so I will know that my tactic and strategy of not eliciting that particular evidence will result in the prosecution's bar from going into it on cross. If I get no ruling in limine, or if the court denies the motion or legal grounds, then many of those areas I will cover on direct. But it is our opinion that those areas to which we are objecting are legally inadmissible and barred for the reasons we stated in the moving papers. The court says, until I hear the direct examination of the witness, I'm in no position to rule upon the scope of the cross-examination. Wow. And therefore, each of the matters referred to in this document would have to wait for the completion of the direct examination. Mr. Levin says, well, we could start with an easy one and work backwards. I'm not going to be eliciting any factual discussion of the Calabasas burglaries. However, I want to know that the court is of the opinion and has so barred the prosecution from going into it unless something happens on direct examination that is elicited. I don't want it to appear to the jury that we have somewhat sandbagged them. If the court should rule against us, I would bring it out in the direct examination in a manner that I and my client felt most appropriate. But I think that it's an appropriate motion in limine and one that must be taken up by the court so that the direct examination can be conducted in a manner that, is appropriate and that Erik Menendez knows what the scope of his testimony will be and his legal rights. The court says, well, let me hear from you, Mr. Gessler, since you're standing up. Your Honor, as to the portion of my most interest, which is the low signo-type violations that could occur in this case, those are violations whether it's heard now, whether it's heard later, whether it's heard ever. The record for that is set forth in the first transcript, and there is no way that the people can ever claim good faith that they believe Erik Menendez would answer affirmatively when he's answered negatively before. The court says, I don't have to hear any of those issues now because the defendant hasn't even been subject to direct examination, so why take up the time now? Well, Your Honor, you don't have to hear them now. And the problem is that those particular objections are well taken whenever they're made because they are based on the knowledge of the case and the knowledge of the district attorneys and the lack of good faith in asking those questions if they are not promising to call a particular rebuttal witness. Court says, one can I slow down, please? My tongue just goes way faster than I want it to. I want to interrupt you now because I don't find that there's any reason to hold a hearing now if we're approaching the direct examination of a witness and those objections relate to solely cross-examination. Mr. Gessler says, low signal violations do, Your Honor. It is to put the district attorney on notice as to the particular low signal violations that I see as being possible here based on the transcript. There are others, as I've said. This is not exhaustive, but I think that they should know that the low signal rule there and be on notice of that, given some time as to where I'm concerned about a mistrial if that area is gone into without low signal good faith. The court says, we'll keep those in mind, and before cross examination, if necessary, we'll deal with them before the defendant's cross examination. I feel like this is kind of like doing things backwards. Like, how can you know what topics you want to get into on your direct examination if you don't know how the court's going to rule? You know what I'm saying? So, whatever. And Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, I'm not sure that I made it entirely clear with respect to strategy. The strategy extends to whether or not Erik Menendez would even testify. If the prosecution's going to be allowed to go into the entirety of the areas to which we object, we very well may not call him as a witness. And if he testifies and these items are not elicited and the court allows the prosecution to then cross-examine, we have, and Mr. Menendez is being put in this position where he testifies and takes a chance that he won't be cross-examined on what we believe to be irrelevant areas and areas that the prosecution should be precluded from going into. So we have to know before Erik Menendez testifies to decide whether or not he even will testify. It's a great point. Court says, well, as I've said, these are areas of cross-examination, and I can't rule upon them until I hear his direct examination. That is some bullshit. I'm sorry, but it is. You say you won't be opening the door to something, but that's your view. Okay, but isn't that how examinations work? One side puts on somebody, and if they open the door, then the other side can get into it. But if they don't, then the other side can't. Isn't that how it's supposed to work in courts? Like, I'm so confused. Why is this even a conversation? He says, You say you won't be opening the door to something, but that's your view. Now, until I hear the questions and the answers, I have no way of evaluating whether your view's the correct one. I can't make a ruling in the abstract. Mr. Levin says, for example, the Calabasas burglary. The court says, again, you said you're not going to open the door. I don't know if you will or not until I hear the direct examination. Well, it's pretty easy, Your Honor. You just don't ask questions about the Calabasas burglaries. That's pretty simple to not open the door on that, right? I mean, okay. The court says he doesn't know if you will or not. Mr. Levin says, based on what the court has been exposed to thus far with the 1211 tape, there has been some inference by the court that because the Calabasas thing is mentioned on the tape, that may be sufficient to allow the prosecution to go into that area. I can state that I am not going to go into the Calabasas burglary at all, and I want to know before my client testifies whether the court feels at this particular time there has been sufficient evidence or for any reason that's been presented at this trial so far that the prosecution can go into it. If the state of the case is at this particular time that the Calabasas burglary is not admissible, I think that's what I'm asking the court to so indicate. The court says, I don't know what your client is going to say about the contents of the December 11th tape, his relationship with Oziel, any of those matters. Those are all issues that touch upon the subject you are now asking the court to rule upon. Yes, you're right, Judge. And if he does touch upon those things that he's not supposed to talk about, which I'm sure he's probably going to be instructed, let's not talk about those things. If he does talk about those things, then the state will get to cross on that. But just to not rule on anything ahead of time sounds ridiculous to me. That's not how this is done. He says, I have no way of evaluating that without having heard the testimony of your client. Very well, Your Honor, says Mr. Levin. Anything else then before the commencement of the testimony of Erik Menendez? No, Your Honor, just a little break. Okay, you have 10 minutes here. Then a recess was taken, and now we're getting to Erik Menendez's testimony, which will be tomorrow. So make sure you are subscribed and have those notifications ready. And we will begin Erik Menendez's testimony after that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and take care. Bye now.